Can all of you see my slides?
Yes, yes, sir.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes, yes.
I'll make it. Okay, so I'll be talking on respiratory problems in neuromuscular disorders. Patients with neuromuscular or chest wall disease commonly have respiratory problems resulting from some combination of respiratory muscle dysfunction, decreased lung and chest wall complaints. And Ravichandran, could you mute all the mics
Yes, sir.
except the speaker?
Yes, sir.
These factors may contribute to difficulty with clearance of airway secretions, ventilation perfusion mismatching, and eventually global alveolar hyperventilation. Sleep disordered breathing is a significant cause of morbidity and mortality among patients with neuromuscular and chest wall disorders. It is most often due to obstructive sleep apnea or nocturnal hypoventilation. Central sleep apnea can also be seen in patients with myotonic and muscular dystrophy. So whenever we see these kind of neuromuscular disorder patients, it is very important to assess their respiratory status and ask about the sleep history, because these are often missed and it may be one of the reasons for their sudden morbidity, mortality, sudden death while sleep, or maybe deterioration of neurological status kind of thing. The presence of symptoms The presence of symptoms is the major factor favoring evaluation of the patient for obstructive sleep apnea, central sleep apnea, or hypoventilation. Some patients may have sleep disordered breathing without symptoms, but with suggestive physiologic parameters. So they don't have any symptoms, and we have to assess routinely these patients to find out whether they have any sleep issues or any oxygen saturation issues. Severe restriction on pulmonary function test or unexplained cor pulmonale. So a patient can have additional cor pulmonale, additional heart failure, and they can have issues of respiration. All these things can be there in a patient coming to the OP with neuromuscular disorders, chronic neuromuscular disorders, especially acute like myasthenia gravis or Guillain-Barré. Those things we know how to manage in the acute phase. But chronic patients coming to the clinic, is very important to pick up these patients with this kind of abnormalities. Such patients should be evaluated with an arterial blood gas and a sleep study. It is not routinely done every visit actually, but we have to do at some stage if we are suspecting the patient has severe neuromuscular disorder, chronic severe neuromuscular disorder patient, to find out whether these patients need any help to prevent or to make their life longer by appropriately handling the issue. The symptoms are sleep disorder breathing. So they can, what are the complaints? And we have, they don't tell actually, and we have to ask them some straightforward questions or some leading questions to them to find out whether these patients have associated sleep disorder breathing. So we have to ask any excessive daytime sleepiness and morning headache, and they have very restless sleep. And the parents can be able to tell in children, or maybe the wife or the spouse will be able to tell whether their sleep is very restless and they have insomnia. Some patients with obstructive sleep apnea may awaken with choking or shortness of breath. So they may get up suddenly while sleeping and say that they have some difficulty or some problem. So it's very important to give attention to this kind of symptoms. Snoring and apnea. So the patients can have snoring. They may be big like obstructive sleep apnea. They can be normal and normal built, but they can due to central sleep apnea. Nightmares and enuresis may be the symptoms of sleep disorder breathing. So we have to ask that whether they're getting nightmares. So the sleep disorders and this kind of bedwetting, all those things can be an associated symptom of sleep disorder breathing. Even when pulmonary dysfunction is severe, dyspnea is often lacking in patients with neuromuscular disease, probably because exercise capacity is limited by involvement of non-respiratory muscles. These patients don't have only respiratory muscle weakness, they have weakness of other muscles, non-respiratory muscles also. So they may not complain to the clinician that they have difficulty in breathing or dyspnea, and we have to suspect and we have to evaluate the patients appropriately. It's very important in a clinical setting. Patients with polio who had initial involvement of respiratory, trunk or bulbar muscles, particularly with associated scoliosis or vocal cord paralysis, are more likely than other polio patients to develop abnormalities of gas exchange during sleep. So we have to look for what kind of muscle weaknesses is having these patients. These patients have like respiratory, trunk or bulbar muscles, and they have scoliosis or vocal cord paralysis. These are the patients particularly prone for this kind of respiratory issues. Kyphoscoliosis, even in the absence of neuromuscular disease, is associated with nocturnal hypoventilation and obstructive sleep apnea. So if somebody is having kyphoscoliosis, we have to evaluate these patients for sleep issues and oxygen saturation issues. Daytime respiratory symptoms are more common when the angle of the thoracic spinal deformity approaches 100 degrees. So when the more the bending and more the like 100 degrees or more, you have to keep an eye on these patients, that they are the people more prone for the daytime respiratory symptoms. Nocturnal oxygen desaturation is not directly correlated with the degree of scoliosis or with either lung volumes or ventilatory responsiveness. So you don't need to correlate directly. Sometimes the one parameter alone may not be enough to say that the patients have respiratory issues while sleep. Patients with a diaphragm weakness may report increased shortness of breath in the supine position, or may increase pillows or props to sleep in a more upright position. So we have to ask, when you see a neuromuscular, we always have they complain about muscle pain, they feel that their scoliosis is troublesome, and all the complaint they'll say. But these are all, we need a leading question to these patients, that how do you sleep? Can you lie down flat? Do you get up in the night, in the middle of the night with some choking sensation? And do you feel headache in the morning? Do you feel confused in the morning? All these histories are very, very important in chronic neuromuscular disorder patients, because we need help from the pulmonologist, our colleagues, to help these patients, because most of the time these patients come to the neuromuscular clinic, and they need a separate attention for these issues, because it can increase the mortality of this patient if it is not attended in time or not appropriately handled. Patients with amyotrophic lateral sclerosis are at increased risk for sleep-related breathing disorders, particularly obstructive sleep apnea and nocturnal hypoventilation. Nocturnal oxygen desaturation correlates with nocturnal hypoventilation, but is insensitive and will miss approximately 30% of cases detected by transcutaneous capnography. That's what I was telling before, that we should not depend upon only one parameter to come to a conclusion. We have to see overall whether these patients are going through these kind of problems. It's very important to pick up these patients early stage to appropriately handle the issues to prevent the mortality. Routine follow-up visits for patients with neuromuscular disease should incorporate questions. So we need to have a separate questionnaire when these patients come to the neuromuscular disorder clinic to pick up this kind of problem, and which will be having a long-term impact on the outcome of the patient and the longevity of the patient. Patients with daytime hypoxemia and hypercarbia often have further deterioration of gas exchange in sleep. So when you see hypoxemia and hypercarbia in the daytime itself, these patients will have more problem while sleeping in the night. It's very, very important to focus more, not only to treat the daytime problem, to also to focus into the nighttime problem. You have to expect these people have more problem in the night, and we have to appropriately treat it actually. Patients with even mild abnormalities in daytime blood gases are at risk for significant disruption of nocturnal gas exchange. So you may see a mild abnormality, but the abnormality may be more gross in the night actually. So you should not think, okay, they are okay in the daytime, very borderline abnormality, or they may be okay in the night. So it's very important. Whatever you see in the daytime gives a clue that there may be more issues going on at night time. Most severe nocturnal oxygen desaturation is seen and should be suspected in those patients with cor pulmonale, polycythemia, and daytime systemic hypertension. So when you see a cor pulmonale, when the RBC count is high and there is a daytime systemic hypertension, you should be very, very careful that there's something going on in the night with these patients in the saturation point of view. Patients with maximal inspiratory pressure below 60% of predicted, or a forced vital capacity below 1 to 1.5 liter due to amyotrophic lateral sclerosis or other neuromuscular diseases, are more likely to have significant nocturnal desaturation. So when you see the patients OP in the morning, so look for the MIP. What is the MIP? This patient MIP. What is the forced vital capacity is? When you see abnormality, they have more problem at night. So we have to be very, very careful. These patients has to be, as I was telling repeatedly, is very important. It makes a long difference in their longevity. The maximal sniff nasal inspiratory force avoids the need for a mouthpiece, and thus may be better suited than the vital capacity and maximal inspiratory pressure for testing patients with bulbar weakness. In bulbar weakness patients, very difficult. They have weakness of bulbar muscles. So you can use a test called maximal sniff nasal inspiratory force, which gives a clue, because you can't do the test because there is a bulbar weakness. Patients with concomitant airflow obstruction tends to have a greater gas exchange abnormalities or carpulmonale associated with sleep disorder breathing than do patients with the normal airway resistance. So we have to keep in mind this, the obstructive lung disease is not, is common. It's a common problem. So these patients can have associated obstructive lung disease also, in addition to the sleep disorder breathing. So we have to make sure that we are not missing obstructive lung disease in addition to the sleep disorder breathing. That for that we have to do the pulmonary function test. Then you need treatment of both obstructive lung disorder as well as for the sleep disorder breathing. Pulmonary function test should be performed routinely for detection of coexistent airflow obstruction. Other treatable conditions which may contribute to restrictive lung disease include hypothyroidism and hypophosphatemia. Obesity increases the risk for obstructive sleep apnea. Obesity hypoventilation syndrome, impaired left ventricular function occurs in some patients with obstructive sleep apnea. Duchenne muscular dystrophy may be associated with cardiomyopathy and conduction abnormalities. Heart failure, particularly, is associated with Cheyne-Stokes respiration, contributes to nocturnal oxygen desaturation and sleep fragmentation. It is important to assess patients with neuromuscular and chest wall disorders for concomitant heart failure. Essential part of the assessment is to document abnormalities of oxygenation and sleep. Overnight oximetry, portable multi-channel devices, and polysomnogram are available. Optimal test need workup. Actually, we need to do whatever test appropriate to the patient. We can't do the PSC for all the patients. Evaluation of patients suspected of having sleep disorder breathing should be done by clinicians with experience in pulmonary and sleep medicine. It's very important to refer these patients to the pulmonary department, the respiratory department, and to find out whether these patients have this kind of problem, because they can give appropriate advice, because we are not the specialist in handling this kind of respiratory issue. But we have to suspect, we have to have a questionnaire, we have to pick up these patients and send to the appropriate clinic for the further management. Polysomnogram is the gold standard. False negative studies are reported. Not clear whether this problem is due to non-apneic sleep disorder breathing. So suppose the polysomnogram is not giving very clue in some situations. We have to take all the factors into account to come to a conclusion. Polysomnogram also useful in detecting patient ventilator asynchrony when patients started on non-invasive positive pressure ventilation. So it may be useful to find out some asynchrony of ventilator. It's also useful for picking up the other issues, very important issues in managing the patients. If you take the oximetry, overnight oximetry alone may be used to screen for oxygen desaturation associated with the severe nocturnal hypoventilation in patients with neuromuscular and chest wall disease. It's a basic tool which everybody can possess, and it can give some clue to us. But it can underestimate sleep apnea, as low sensitivity in detecting obstructive sleep apnea patients receiving supplemental oxygen. If they are getting some oxygen therapy, and it may not be able to pick up certain things which you need some additional parameters. Oximetry is helpful in screening for residual oxygen desaturation in patients who have been started on nocturnal non-invasive ventilation without evaluation in a sleep laboratory. You cannot send all the patients to sleep laboratory because they'll be loaded. It is very difficult to get expert opinion for every single patient. So we have to send the appropriate patients when we don't have a clue. So there's something called home sleep apnea testing. Home sleep apnea testing with 4 or more channels like heart rate, airflow, chest movement, and oximetry, likely to detect moderate to severe obstructive sleep apnea. You can do in the house itself. We have in Chennai, people can come and do the test, and it can give some reasonable idea. Severity may be underestimated and mild disease may be missed entirely. Sleep disruption or fragmentation, a significant factor in causing daytime sleepiness is not assessed by oximetry or portable studies. If there is a strong clinical suspicion of sleep disorder breathing, but oximetry or home sleep apnea testing is negative, full polysomnogram should still be obtained. So we have to recommend the patient to go for the proper testing in the specialist laboratory under the specialist care. Transcutaneous carbon dioxide monitoring using newest generation equipment appears to be reasonably accurate when combined with oximetry, more sensitive than nocturnal oximetry alone in detecting nocturnal hypoventilation. Relevant in patients with neuromuscular disease who may be started on non-invasive ventilation as outpatients and are in situations where arterial blood gases are not easy to obtain. End-tidal PCO2, PET CO2 Monitoring also included in some polysomnograms and is believed to be particularly useful in pediatric studies. One study found that PET CO2 measured from exhaled gas in a mask, particularly during the use of supplemental oxygen or positive airway pressure delivery systems that incorporate a flow through to wash out dead space, did not adequately reflect arterial values in adults. So we should not depend upon single parameter, single test alone in a difficult situation. Most of the time that you will get some reasonable idea. Esophageal pressure monitoring during sleep is helpful in distinguishing central versus obstructive sleep apnea. It offers a sensitive way of detecting intrathoracic pressure swings related to respiratory effort. Also useful in detecting upper airway resistance syndrome. Although esophageal balloons for pressure monitoring are not yet considered standard instrumentation during polysomnogram, their clinical role is gradually increasing. So if we come to the conclusion,
during the 2008 crisis have been largely silent.
Sleep disordered breathing is common in patients with neuromuscular or chest wall disease and is a significant cause of morbidity or mortality. The detection and therapy of sleep disordered breathing have the potential to improve the quality and duration of life in these patients. It's very, very important when you see a neuromuscular disorder patient in the clinic. We have to pick up this abnormality. We should have standard questionnaire. We should do simple testing. And in appropriate situation, we should ask for, and most of the time you need to ask for pulmonologist opinion, how to handle the problem and how to increase the longevity of the patient and how to make their sleep and the breathing comfortable and to have a better quality of life. Thank you very much.